Thank you very much for your attention today. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity. My presentation today is not going to be a technical one per se. It's more focusing on the human element when it comes to augmented reality implementation. And let me start off with a personal journey. And this was in February 2012. It was not long after my first daughter was born that I decided to do a trek through the Himalayas. Now, I got interesting reactions from my family members when I just said that, and I did a solo trek. I think they supported me overall. But nonetheless, I was on a plane and landed in one of the most beautiful countries. As you, to paint a picture, you stand there, look around, pristine mountains, majestic, beautiful, strong. It's a great feeling. But things didn't go according to plan. The fourth day of my trek, my legs gave way, and I couldn't walk any further. I was mentally and physically exhausted. All kinds of self-doubts creep in as to why I did this. Why am I even here? But what happened at that point is the Sherpa who I was working with, or the guide who I was with, he reached out and literally carried me through this very difficult piece of treks, of a particular trek. And then we went through the next stage. And every day in the morning, he coached me until we went through it. Essentially, what had happened is all the planning that I did and all the training I did before leaving meant absolutely nothing when I was in an environment which was new and changing. And that's going to be the focus of today. If you look at what's happening and hearing some of our speakers, it's amazing the level of change that's coming up with technology. And what's the human impact of it? So some of you may have seen this slide before. If you haven't seen it, it's from the first ever movie that was made, a motion movie that was made. It was released in Paris in 1896. The reason I'm sharing this story with you is what happened was when when the movie case started, or one of the scenes, the train comes from the back and essentially moves towards the front. This caused the audience, who had never seen a movie before, who were in an immersive experience, to run out. They were scared. And I don't think we've changed that much as humans. Technology has, but that's your basic reaction to it actually started right. So I thought it was very interesting, the fact that if you look at how immersive technology, especially now when we start looking at AR and VR, it's got a very personal human effect. And we really need to understand what the impact of that is. If you look at the magnitude of change, so just considering the fact that it took, I think, 46 years for electricity to hit 50 million users. Mobile phones, it took 12 years. And we're talking YouTube 4 years and Twitter 3. So yes, there's a very fast moving adoption. Now, if I look at some of the AR statistics, the IDC report, we're looking at going from a $5.6 billion industry in 2016 to $162 billion industry in 2020, I think. So what does that actually mean in the context of humans adopting to change? And the focus here, it's more, if you're talking about from a work perspective, what does that actually mean in terms of enterprises? So what I'd like to just pause for a minute, and we've got some customers as well as solution providers here. If you could just pause and reflect upon saying, well, some of the technologies that's been shown and some of the changes. How would that be accepted, especially when you start talking about AI, AR, VR, and probably a mix of all of those is what's going to really make the difference. From the top down, from a CEO to every level, this is going to impact. So what does that mean? So I think we need to start to evolve as well as providers of the technology. We can't just be hardware providers or software providers anymore. I think what we need to start to do is become thought leaders, become the trusted partner to guide our customers through this journey. And it's also not going to be an instant fix, or it's not going to be something that's ready straight away. It's a matter of experimentation. We're going to make mistakes, but not all solutions may be ready straight away. And I think in order for that, we need to start to look at a different approach and start to look at how we can integrate change management at the outset. So work with your customers right from day one in terms of what they're trying to innovate. Innovation comes from within as against from outside. I think the key component here is empathy. The couple of use cases this morning when Jürgen was talking about, the actual users need to be involved right from day one, especially when we're talking about such an immersive type of products. More than ever, that's highly important. I think the last thing which we also need to understand, in order to truly empower our customers in the co-creation process, in order to design their enterprises, I think one important aspect to consider is, generally, there are three strategies that's taking place within an organization. You'll have your operational strategies, the 0 to 12 months, and then you'll have your growth strategies, the 1 to 3 years, and then you've got understanding the future, which is 4 years plus. So an organization may be running all three of them at one particular time. So when we're talking about innovation or introducing AR or introducing VR into that framework, where exactly are we positioning it? And I think as technology providers, we really need to start to understand that, understand where are we playing in our customer's mindset, and how do we become the trusted partner through the entire journey. The diagram on the left-hand side there, this is by Geoffrey Moore. Some of you may have heard about crossing the chasm. And it goes through essentially how the technology adoption goes. So it starts off the early stage innovators who love technology for the sake of buying the technology. They're excited by that. Then the early adopters. Now the early adopters, I guess this is where people are interested more in the proof. You know, they're the visionaries. They can see what the product can do. They're prepared to accept that it's not going to be perfect, but they still can see how it will add value to their business. Now, the bit after that is the early majority, where we're talking about mainstream or adoption. The decision making here is very different. Here we're talking about has to work every time. There's no room for error in that sense. They want to know what their competitors are doing. They want to know what's the real ROI, what are the benefits. So it's not as excited about the technology per se, but more from a business outcome perspective. So according to the theory, the way we look at this is how do you cross from the early adopters to the early majority? Now, with this in mind, I think one of the factors is that we need to work from right to left. Start off with customer-defined use cases. So at Appearition, we've got a framework that we use. So essentially work with the customer right at the outset and start the innovation process with them, where mutually develop what the ROIs are going to look like. And this is for one specific use case. And this is, again, one of the challenges with AR and VR. I think AR especially, the use cases are plenty, but we really need to focus on one specific pain point or one specific area that we can get benefits on. De-risking business as usual is a big aspect, because at the end of the day, getting a budget for doing innovation and taking away technical resources who are already working on it is always a challenge. because the technical resource is already engaged. So how do we essentially move away from that? And last but not least, as a part of this process, try and utilize the customer data. So when we build a use case, it's very specific to what the outcome that they wish to reach. And then last but not least is a progressive integration. So integrate back in slowly. In my experience in Nepal, one of the things which happened was on the last or second last day, it absolutely started pouring down. And my first instinct was to say, well, okay, it's raining, I'm not going anywhere. But sure enough, my guide, he said, yep, now we're walking down. What essentially happened, I had the trust that he knew what he was doing, so he just followed. And then I went down and I asked him later on and said, hang on, how did you know to keep on going? I was expecting that he had some understanding of the nature and things like that. And he told me something. He said he wasn't sure, but he didn't know. But he felt that if he'd stayed there, we would have been staying there for a long period of time. And my outcome, which was to leave the next day, wouldn't have been met. So he decided to take the chance. The reason I'm showing that is I think it's not as dissimilar. We're going to make mistakes as technology providers with our customers in this process. There are going to be times when we say we don't know, but we still got to work in the context of the best outcomes for our customers, and that's got to be a key component. And for enterprises, I think AR and VR is going to be a long journey. You know, we're at the early stages. It's going to evolve. There's going to be new use cases. There's going to be things changing. Benefits are not going to be there straight away, but when time now, if we make the bold decisions to invest, the riches will come, and it will be to give you the competitive advantage within your framework. So thank you very much for your time today. Open for questions.
Thank you, Vivek. So, I think you have one question, but it's a pretty good question. So, how do you empower customers to participate in the creation process?
I think one of the important things I think is the whole need to have a framework in place, and if it's a design thinking framework or something along those lines, which is very customer focused. I think empathy is a key aspect because we need to work with all levels of the organisation. So it is a matter of having a joint workshop. And it's also a matter of being vulnerable at that point and saying, well, we may not know all the answers. And I think even now, if you look at AR, VR, and IR, we are not going to be just one product. It's going to be a mesh of different technologies coming in. So I think if we start off with the approach of saying, yes, we don't know all the answers, but let's try and work out where your real problems are, and then work through that process. It's a first step.
Super. So Vivek, thanks again. And,
Excellent.